I think for those of you who are going to be superintendents and are superintendents in urban and urban-like areas, I think it may be a little helpful to, tell you how I got here before you today at this podium, because it's an interesting journey. As was mentioned, I went to Howard University. I studied history, which I love very much, so more biographies. And then I went to law school. And my whole notion, in fact, let me just tell you how I got into politics. That may just, because it shapes who I am. So I grew up in a military family. My dad spent 30 years in the military. I had a reading problem early on. So I repeated the first and the second grade. From that time, and you're in the military, you move every 2 years. So I was always 2 years older than my peers. And when you move, people challenge you. I usually accepted the challenge, which usually meant that I got kicked out of school, which usually meant my mom came and got me. And so what I tell the young adults who sometimes occupy my house more than I do, called my children, I got kicked out of every school in the United States and Okinawa, Japan. And if that was the end of the story, it would be something. But what I was blessed with is that at no point in my life or my career did my father ever think I was not going to college. Even during those periods where all the statistics said, there's no way this guy's gonna make it out of high school, let alone go to college, he was preparing. It didn't make me change my behavior. What made me change my behavior was, two things actually. My mother, because we're in Okinawa, that's where my dad was stationed, but he actually really was stationed in Korea. So he'd do these rotation things where he'd be gone for 6 months, he'd come back for 3 months. 6 months he's gone, I'm acting up. I'm running wild. And one day I got kicked out of school as usual for fighting. And my mom, said to me, you know what, I'm not picking you up. It was a requirement, you had to pick them up because it was dangerous. We lived off base. We actually lived in an Okinawa village. And she said, I'm not picking you up. I didn't believe her, so I waited. And I didn't see her by the school, so I went by the gate where, at that time they had gates to get on base. I went there, waited, she didn't come. I started walking home. And I swore that it was like 12 miles that I walked home. I was like, God, you make me walk 12 miles. Now I've gone back to Okinawa, it is literally a mile. But I walked home and I got to our house and my mother was sitting there with her hand over her head and this apron she would wear when she would clean up because she worked in the school system, during the day. And she looked totally beat down. It just depressed me. I mean, she looked like, I don't know what to do with you. And it made me feel guilty. That here's this lady that has loved me and I love her, and she is just beat down. So what it made me do was change at least my behavior. But what really got me on the road to get into politics was when we moved back to the States. Now we had lived in Okinawa, Japan, very multicultural, very hot, and we moved to Beverly, Massachusetts in February, where it was freezing, and we hadn't been to the States in like 4 years, so I wasn't used to, cold weather. And where the black population was my family. First day my brother and I went to school, we walked around, we were like, did you see any people of color here? And he said, no. I said, I didn't either. But in that school where there were no black students other than my brother and I, my only focus in life was playing football, and playing football. Now, it was clear that I'm 5'8.5", and I was 5'8.5" then. I wasn't gonna play professional football. But I really had no goal in life, and I'll try and shorten this story. But I love football more than anything else. And in order to play football, before I was a good football player, so people would just kind of let me play. But I had a teacher there, Miss Lutz, English teacher, who I thought was the meanest lady in the world, because she wasn't going to let me play football. I needed a C out of her class. Rather than just giving me the daggone C, she was like, "Nope, you got to do extra credit." I said, "Well, extra credit?" She said, "Yes, you have to come back after school and do extra credit. You have to read 1 or 2 books." And I said, "Okay, well, which books?" She gave me a choice, and I tell this to students today. Wuthering Heights, which was that thick, great book, by the way, or Black Boy. I didn't know a thing about Black Boy, but I knew it was short. The sooner I read, the sooner I got on the football field. That is really was my goal. And so I read Black Boy, and it completely changed my life. Just as my mother made me feel guilty about my behavior, Black Boy made me feel guilty about my life. Because what it made me realize is that the life that I was leading was not the normal life of most people, African Americans in the United States. The life that I was leading was not even the normal life that most of my relatives and cousins in Springfield, Massachusetts, who had been in and out of the penal system, had led. The reason it made me feel guilty is that my parents, no matter what I did, were always there to undergird me. No matter how many times I failed, they would make sure that I could get up. That is why my dad never, worried about me going to college. I was going to college. And it made me feel guilty about the opportunities I had been given for 17 years and had just thrown away. And so it made me want to do something with my life other than just play football. I didn't know what, but I wanted to change things. And so I got involved looking at politics. And so my dad I would look at, political situations with him. And by this time we had moved to Springfield, Massachusetts, where my grandmother was. And I was just thinking, maybe I'd be a social worker. I really liked Che Guevara, so maybe I'd be a revolutionary, but Dad was afraid to get shot. So I threw that out the window. But I was watching this political debate in Springfield, Massachusetts, and there was a representative on TV. He had been there for the only black representative for a long time. And I'm railing at this dude. I'm like, you know what, he doesn't care about people. He's been there 20 years, the community looks the same, nothing has changed, da-da-da-da-da. You know how a 17-year-old, they know it. And my dad said, if you could do better, you should run. And as any 17-year-old, or in my case at my house, 21-year-old, tells you, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna show you you don't have to give up your principles in order to be elected. And then I decided from that day that I would actually run for office, that I was gonna prove to my dad, who really only cared that I become a good citizen. That's really what he wanted. But I was gonna change things in the community. I said, so, well, how do I become a politician? Washington, D.C., that's where they are, right? No one in my family had gone to college. I figured Washington, D.C. And so, also true story, quick. I decided that I was going to go to Howard University because the only black doctor we had in Springfield went to Howard. The psychologist that worked with my mom at the nursing home went to Howard. So it's got to be a great place, and it's in D.C. What better? So when I was applying, my dad said, son, I know you want to go there, but hey, why don't we start at this community college and da-da-da. I said, nah. He said, well, it's a pretty hard school to get into. I looked at him, I was like, what are you talking about? I had no clue. And to this day, I'm convinced somebody at Howard made a mistake and let me in. Because certainly it wasn't on my grades or my SAT score. But they did, they let me in. So that started my journey to go into office. What it led to was going to DC, staying there for law school, meeting my wife, and moving to Prince George's County. And finally, and I'll skip so we don't take all the time, finally being able to run for office. So my thought was, when I finally got elected to the House of Delegates in 1994, was that I was going to work on those issues that I really cared about: tax reform, economic development, all of those great things that make great communities and build. And that was going to be my focus. And then I made the mistake of being chair of the Prince George's County delegation, because my interaction with schools were that my wife was a public school, and still today is a public school advocate. So whether we were living in DC on P Street with the crack house right next to us, she was sending our children to public schools, because her philosophy was that if we put our children in those schools, we'll turn them around quicker. And we have the resources, since we're both lawyers. I can't say that I shared that at the time when our son was born, but that was her philosophy. When we went to Prince George's County, many of our friends from Howard were going to private school, but our kids, and they would say to us, like, "Man, you guys must be doing really bad. You all right?" But she was sentiment. So my interaction was as a parent. When I went to appropriations as chair of the delegation, and my thoughts about, how I can move up, it was there on appropriations that Pete Rawlins, who was the chair at the time, put me on a very select committee. And on that select committee, they had passed this big tax bill, tax reduction bill for businesses. Really, it was a keep a business in Montgomery County. And at the end in the legislature, at the beginning of the legislative season, you go to a meeting much like this, and there's a lecture. And they invite a guest to come and talk about what we've done in the legislative period. We had this guy come, sat where, we were sitting where you are, and he talked for an hour, and it literally was the most boring speech I'd ever heard in my entire life. And at the end of it, the chair said to him, "Well, you gave a really good speech," which I disagree with the chair. He said, "But you didn't mention the tax cut that we gave you." The guy said, "Tax cut's fine." He said, "Whether you give it to me or not, we just want surety." He said, "Well, why did you stay in Montgomery County?" And he said, "If I'm going to invest millions of dollars in a business, I want to be in a place that's going to be around. It's their school system. Calling cards for suburban areas and jurisdictions, cities are about the only places, like DC, you might be able to get away with it, but your calling card is your public education. Who we are in Prince George's County and how people think about us is our public school system. You can't have economic development, you can't have progress without dealing with that issue. That is the lesson that I learned that day. That if I wanted to make Prince George's County all it could be, I needed to find out how we fixed the school system. Rather than doing like most big city mayors, county executives, running away and divorcing yourself from the school system, we needed to embrace it more. That was not a philosophy that was shared by most people in the General Assembly. That was not a philosophy shared by the county executive at the time, who was my good friend. Because what people believed and what they will believe when you walk into your jobs is, it is your job to fix the school system. If you fail, you fail. What I'm unwilling to do is to put my political career along with yours. Your success becomes my success. I can't move up the political ladder unless you succeed. Most politicians will not do that. Because changing our education system in urban and urban-like areas is hard. It's hard work, and it's not work that happens overnight. Political people deal in 2- and 4-year cycles. But I was determined to change it. So as chair of the Prince George's County delegation, I decided the school system was fighting, the school board was fighting with the superintendent. We couldn't move education. I'm gonna change that. I said, what we need is to get rid of the school board, figure out what's going on, and move forward. And so I did. Put a bill in, took away the elected school board, put in appointed people to see if we can move the education system. I was soundly defeated for office. After I lost, and my wife made me get up off the couch and find a job because we had 3 kids to support, I spent 8 years in a nonprofit, going around an education nonprofit, actually looking at school systems throughout the United States. And it was that opportunity, because I never really paid attention to education other than this, but I was sure I was right that you had to marry the two together. And that the leadership had to come from the leadership of the county. You are the chief, education officer. You are the intellectual power. But there's a person in each one of your jurisdictions who is the moral leader of the county, who is the head of the county, or head of the city, or head of the jurisdiction. They have to be tied together, and I believe that sincerely. So I ran for county executive again. Because in 2002, I ran, they kicked me out. They didn't elect me. I ran again in 2006, and they still were mad about what I did, so they didn't elect me. And I ran again in 2010, and they elected me. And what people would say when I would go around to these debates is, are you going to take over the school system? I said no. I had no intention of taking over anybody's school system. I said, because I believe that you can use the bully pulpit of your position as county executive or leader to push education. And I sincerely believe that. So I came into office, I put together a Commission on Excellence Education, worked with the school system, and my job was to give $1.6 billion as county executive to our school system, a little less than. But the long and short of it is, and how I ended up here was, the school board and the superintendent were clashing. And to me, what that meant was we were not moving and making the decisions we need to make as a county to move it forward. The other thing that disturbed me when I became county executive or leader of the jurisdiction was, other than once I gave the money to the school system, really my responsibility was over. Other than just as a parent or as a citizen, whether Dr. Maxwell or whoever the superintendent at that time, Dr. Height, whether he did well or bad, my reelection campaign was not based on that. No one blamed me if test scores went down. No one blamed me if principals left. No one blamed me if we didn't pay teachers enough. No one blamed me. Because I could always say I gave them all the money that I have. It also meant that I didn't have to take any risk at all. I could just write it out. In fact, what I could do is I had somebody to blame. So it gave me the same escape that most people that you will, elected officials you'll run into have. Well, for those who know me know that I am impatient. And there are people in here who have actually taught my children, so they know I'm impatient. That wasn't good enough for me. In a county, in Prince George's County, we are the wealthiest African American community in the United States and probably the world. We're the most educated African American community in the United States and probably the world. And yet our school system ranks in the bottom. Does that make any sense to anybody? The investments we make as a county in our school system ranks at the bottom. Does that make any sense to anybody? Those are the things that nag me. We could build, as I said to my staff, we could build all of the development we want. Unless we change the school system, it's not going to happen. So I got tired, and when I get tired, one day I woke up, usually my wife helps me. My wife would look at me and say, man, that school system is still not making progress. And so I woke up and said, yep, we're getting ready to change things. What I did was went to Annapolis and I got a bill to change the structure of how we actually do education in Prince George's County and for that matter, in Maryland. We are the only jurisdiction in the state of Maryland, after this bill, where the county executive appoints the CEO of the school system. We're the only jurisdiction in the state of Maryland where the county executive appoints the president of the school board. We're the only jurisdiction in the state of Maryland where the county executive appoints members of the school board. We're the only jurisdiction in the state of Maryland where the CEO sits on the county executive's cabinet. When the governor at the time, Martin O'Malley, said, "That is a great idea. Why don't we try and see if other people want this?" Do you know how many county executives and mayors took me up on my offer? Can anybody guess? How many wanted to join me? 0. In fact, they said, "Are you crazy? You have just put yourself in the middle of the worst situation you could be." I said, "Oh no." To make sure that I wasn't the only one, in this situation, there's a county council in Prince George's County, 9 of them, elected officials, have to vote on the budget. And they were like, "Man, I don't know why you want that, but go ahead." I said, No. We want it. To make sure they tied in with me, we gave them an appointment to the board. What I wanted, and what I still want, is for Dr. Maxwell in the school system and the Prince George's County government and the elected officials to all be tied together. His success, his failure becomes ours. In this one piece of legislation, just think about this as I close. This one piece of legislation, not only is the county executive tied to the future of our school system, not only is the county council tied to the future of our school system, but the state legislature is tied to the future of our school system. And they said, "Well, whoa, not us. We gave you the authority." I said, "Exactly. You gave me the authority. You voted. I can't vote in Annapolis. You voted for it. So if this is a bad experiment, guess what? Your career is a bad experiment." And so, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" I said, "You got to need to make it work." Because we all fighting. We all treading together. What's going on in Prince George's County is not just his problem. It's not just the principal's problem. It is all of our problems because all of our careers are on the line. You want to know how you're going to succeed as superintendents in urban areas? Everybody's got to buy in. It wasn't an idea that I thought of. I got it, quite honestly, when before they picked Michelle Reed, they actually interviewed Rudy Cruz. Rudy Cruz. I've never met him, but I saw, like I said, I'm curious, so I look at everything. I saw his interview in DC. That dude said, "Listen, if I take this job, I want the mayor to sign, I want the council to sign, I want everybody to sign on the line. Because if I go down, you all go down with me. If I succeed, we all succeed." Guess what? That's what grabs them. I was like, that dude is smart. Dr. Maxwell didn't have to ask that. What I want and what I'm going to leave to Prince George's County is whoever steps in after me, their success is tied to the school system's success. Their future is tied to the school system's future. Whatever council member, whatever state legislature comes about, we're all tied in together, because if we're all in it, if we all have something to lose, we'll all try and figure out the best thing. This is what I will close with, to prove the point. So I asked for, because I'm crazy, I asked for a 15 cents tax increase just to go to education. And I thought my staff was going to go bananas. We had just gotten reelected, my approval rates going up, and if you know anything about this area around here, I have a future. There's some things I could do. They were like, "Why are you're at 77%. 77%, I ain't been to 77% ever. I was like, man, they're like, we're rolling. Everything in this county is going. Why would you ask citizens to do that? I said, because Doc asked for it. They said, well, let Doc ask for it then. They said, why would you blow a 77% approval rating? We could run for governor, senator, you name it. Am I lying, Barry? I said, because we have 77%. That's dice. We can roll. We have cushion. My kids got it. They're like, shoot, you could go down 15% and still be in good shape. But it's using that power of the office to see how we can really push this thing. And it was ugly. There were people calling me names. There were people protesting. There were people mad. There were overflow rooms when we did, because the other thing I did, which really made them mad, was I said, we're going to have public hearings. They're like, oh, we'll do public hearings. Let people come out there, they'll hang it. I said, no, it'd be public discussion. And they were packed. Everywhere you went, it was packed in the county. You couldn't get people to come out and talk about education before. But they were there, right, Doc?
Sure were.
And so everybody in the county was like, man, this is ugly. I said, no, this is beautiful. For the first time in a county like ours, we're having a real discussion about what is the future of our education system and what is your part. How much are you willing to pay and how much are you willing to put in? For the first time, the council members and legislatures and governor had to get into a conversation about where do we go with education. Did we get the 15 cents? No. But for the first time in 30 years, Prince George's County actually passed a tax increase to fund education. Hadn't happened in 30 years. It was the third rail. I was going to die. Everybody's going to hate me. My career would be over. My approval rate today is 77%. I don't say that just as, to brag about the approval rating. I say that when you go into those offices with those politicians, and when you ask them to take the same risk that you're going to take, it doesn't mean their careers are over, because that's what they think. It means if you do the right thing and you say it with the compassion that you should say it, that you're going to be able to improve education. I wish you Godspeed and good luck. God bless you.